So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am happy one more time get the opportunity to be with dear brothers and sisters of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Society of New England, Zerk MIT Shia Muslim Association. Before anything else, I congratulate the listeners, viewers, and everybody the blessed occasions of the month of Sha'ban, 3rd and 4th and 5th, the birthday of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam of Zain al-Abidin, alayhi salam, and then the occasion which we have in future, the half of Shaban, 15 of Shaban, the birthday of Imam Zaman alayhi salam. So as Dr. Masalai said, is the third lecture of our lecture series, and the second lecture we're talking about Judaism in Yemen and Medina, in Judaism in the pre-Islamic Arabia. This lecture will focus in Yemen and Medina. We discussed Judaism in Northern Arabia. This is mostly Southern Arabia, but I will explain more when we go through. So, as a blessing, we usually start with this verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولئن سألتهم من خلق السماوات والأرض ليقولن الله قل الحمد لله بل أكثرهم لا يعلمون لله ما في السماوات والأرض أن الله هو الغني الحميد. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they will surely say, Allah, say all praise belongs to Allah, but most of them do not know. To Allah belongs whatever is in the heavens and the earth. Indeed, Allah is the all-sufficient and the all-laudable. Please recite salawat. We I'm not going to go to introduction. I want to see the map because having it in mind, I have to say some discussions. This is the larger Arabia. Is a like rectangle. Even we considered this part, maybe we can say it could be island out of it connected by water. We discuss about Judaism in the northern Arabia, above Medina, in this area. And then we went to Kingdom of Himyar, and that today we will start a discussion in the south of Arabia, in the Yemen. And kind of conjectures there is a difference in the Judaism. The Jews here, maybe it's the ethnically Jews. Here, the Jews, maybe Arab tribes or Yemeni tribes that converted to Judaism. But I will discuss that. But I want you to have these maps in mind because then we come back to Medina too. And then we have this issue of the sources, which the first lecture we discussed, and also in some way we will have it today. But let's first read it. The main sources are dated or datable material evidence, which is considered both primary and contemporary. And for us, will consist mostly of inscription in their two categories, monumental and graffiti. So we have discussed these in the last two lectures. And we rely on these inscriptions. And the main thing is that what you can get from them is not much, but it's certain. Or it is more or less is contemporary and primary. Primary because it's written by usually by the religious believer. Religious inscriptions are usually like that. And then is again contemporary because if it's dated, is related to the period we are talking pre-Islamic Arabia. Then maybe some contemporary literary evidence, which is divided into primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are in Arabic and include Quran, the Constitution of Medina, and pre-Islamic Arabic poetry. I'm not going to, we could discuss Judaism from perspective of the Quran, even books coming out of it. This would be long lectures. I'm not going to go through that. Constitution of Medina, maybe later on when we go to discussion about beliefs of Mushrikeen or so on, we touch that. And pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, last lecture we discussed, there are a couple of Jewish poets, which the poetry is left with us, they're pre-Islamic, but they do not have very specific features which are different. There is one poem or one few poems to one famous poet which have some elements of reflection of the hereafter. But the whole question is authenticity. It seems maybe it's a little bit Islamicized. Maybe they editors later on make it a little bit more classy and chic and so on. So, and then it was very technical, so I kind of avoid much talking about it. I mentioned it last lecture. Then there are secondary sources which are non-Arabic texts, mostly in Syriac, Greek, written by scholars living in the Middle East. Regarding Christianity, this would be a very important one. Regarding Judaism, a little bit we see is not as we are going to use it. And then non-contemporary literary evidence. This is a vast pool of texts in Arabic, Persian, Greek, Syriac, other languages. Other some contain eyewitness narrations, are therefore apparently primary sources. The time spent between the events and the recording means they're usually treated by Western scholarship as secondary sources. Now, today, the main early part of the lecture, which is a natural continuation of the last one, uh, is Yemen. I go with the primary sources and inscriptions. But then at the latter part of the lecture, which I want to go to Medina, because we don't see much with inscriptions from Medina. Although explorations wasn't much too, and then some are destroyed. But anyway, there are not many inscriptions, and we didn't see much about it. I want you to see, okay, what about these third category? And then you see there are lots of material, but sometimes, and we are familiar with those type of materials, Sirah, Hadith, and different type of books. And I just sampling it to you get a feeling about some of the ideas. There are definitely gems and truth in it, but sometimes it becomes hard, contradictory, and not clear. And then so you have a lot of things, but not certain. So early part of the chapter, the lecture, we mostly work with this one, and then I add some, if we have time, I hope we have some time, some representation for Medinan Jews. The most other parts will be south in Yemen. And then something I think I didn't mention it is good to mention. Look, there are four big events happening very close to each other, and there are religious dimensions to them, really, maybe by the span of 100 years. And you can do contemporary because maybe all peaked around the same time. One is the rise of the Sassanid Empire with the monotheistic Zoroastrianism. I mean, you can call it monotheistic, although maybe dualist, but, comparing to what was before. Ashkanids are, I think they were much Hellenized, and we have to look at it, but they didn't have much emphasis on Zoroastrianism too. So Zoroastrianism is somewhat militant too, or missionary. So that's about 214, the empire rise. But to consolidate, to be there, uh, you're talking end of third century and then fourth century. Then we have Roman Empire and Christianity, which again, Christianity was a spread, but the pivotal event is conversion Constantine to Christianity and declaration of Christianity, tolerance of Christianity, and change of Christianity from a persecuted religion to accepted religion, then the official religion, and then the only religion of the empire, which happened very fast. So again, it's mostly fourth century. The conversion of Constantine, I think, is 312 AD. And then you have around the same time Ethiopic Aksum Empire become Christian, accept Christianity. And then we said in Yemen, around the same time, Himyar kingdom gets dominant and unified South Yemen and unified Yemen. And then usually the three groups of Himyar, Hazar al-Maut, and to region and Saba. Saba is the ancient kingdom. Queen Shiva is from it in Malik Saba. But Himyarites unified and then produce unique kingdom. And then that's the topic we'll see today. They adopt a kind of monotheism, which is a little bit vague, but it seems some cases tends to Judaism, and everybody accept is monotheistic Judaism. How much they were really Judaic and which part of it they took and how much of it is emphasized to distinguish themselves from Ethiopic Christians is important. I have talked about this a little bit in the other lecture series, Yemen and Quran too. So this is interesting. They are the simultaneous. And the other thing which prior to that, I was thinking the unification of kingdom first happened, and then they chose the religion of monotheistic Judaism. I was listening to uh, Greg Fisher, which is really authority to this Islamic Arabia or the Roman, especially Roman and Arabic, Byzantine Roman empire interaction, and there's few books, influential books. I mean, he maybe said maybe kind of maybe simultaneous, adoption of this new identity, adoption and a monotheistic identity, and in rivalry and with the Ethiopian one actually helped to this unified kingdom be established. If they all kept their polytheistic religions, unification maybe was hard, and then they all want to have something prestigious to be able to stand in front of the Ethiopians, and they were always worried about the intents or desire of Ethiopia to conquer Yemen and ruling them. So it could be reverse, that or simultaneous, that this adoption monotheistic Judaism has role and importance in establishing of Himyar kingdom. And then we saw that these are all have effect in inscriptions too. We don't get polytheistic inscriptions after this. And then although itself inscriptions disappear too. For 2 centuries we have monotheistic Judaized inscriptions, then we don't have. So inscriptions are also a little problematic, that relying on them, sometimes they disappear, sometimes the fashion changes. And then this heavy reliance of Western scholarship, the grants, the discoveries, the all Indiana Jones type of thing, discovering, going to the desert, uh, and field study is interesting, but that has its limitations too. Sometimes we have to be careful. So have this in mind. And then the other thing, maybe I can say, I could have said it other lecture, maybe next lecture or the lectures later will be important. But we have 3 Arabic kingdoms, which I want to emphasize. This will be more important, definitely very important when we do Christianity. But okay, I mentioned it. There are 3 Arab kingdoms which are important. One is Ghassanid, which is northwest, which nowadays the Western scholarship prefer to call them Jaffnids by the ruling dynasty. Like I call Qajar instead of some I don't know name, or Zandiya. I don't know. They have it. So the family ruling had it was Jaffnids. They have a form of Christianity, which again, next lecture we'll see there are 3 forms of Christianity that rival together. This is Monophysite or Miaphysite Christianity, which is unrivaled. It was different what the Byzantine Empire, the official Byzantine Chalcedonian or Melkite Christianity. We'll see next lecture. They were ally or vassal of Roman, but the culturally they were Syriac. Then we have Lakhmid kingdom, which is to the east, near Hera, near present-day Kufa, which again the ruling Muslims call them Ghassaniyan and Lakhmid. I see people now they still have people family name from Lebanon, other place Ghassan, Ghassaniyan, Ghassani. Then Lakhmid kingdom, which the ruling family was Nazarites. They were also Christian, but the other Nestorians connected Eastern Church. Eastern Church was under jurisdiction and control of Sassanid Empire. This is the only one. All other churches somewhat Byzantine Empire or Roman Empire claimed jurisdiction. They were ally and vassal of Persian Empire, but also Syriac. And then there is the kingdom of Kenda, which is north of Yemen, goes inside Arabia. They were more vassal of the Himyarites. Maybe I forgot to put it. And then again, now also they called him Hujrites. Hujribna Addi, you have heard, they were from Kenda. And then Ash'as ibn Qais Kendi, which is, was behind the assassination of Imam Ali. He was the guy, Mukhtar, or say Imam Ali series you saw. He was behind the He was supposedly from supporting Imam Ali, but apparently, but he wasn't. He was making conspiracies. Ibn Muljam, I think, maybe uh, was arranged by him to assassinate Imam Ali. But the dynasty was called Hujrid, and we know they were Jewish, but they were vassal of the Himyarites. They were more inside to the Arabia, south of Medina, but north of Yemen. So let's have these. Although this maybe we discuss, I might repeat it next lecture too. So let's go to the continuation of last lecture and the Judaism in Yemen. One of the problem, as we said, is I mean, let alone decide what kind of Judaism they may have is hard. Yemen, but even sometimes whether it is Judaistic or monotheistic or general monotheistic is not easy. Uh, but more or less you can accept. Maybe some are very neutral inscriptions, but some are not as neutral. There are some element of Judaism in it. And then so people usually interpret the neutral ones in the light of these ones too. So occasionally in these inscriptions, God is called God of Israel, you know, the way Bible does it. Some inscriptions, we will see some of them mention synagogues. We have another inscription which is related to the graveyard, which explicitly says this graveyard is for the Jews and non-Jews, Gentile, shouldn't be buried over there. You can see this Yehudi and Yehudan. But this Ermim, as the word for Gentiles, these are most probably Aramaic, so I don't try to I'll pronounce them. It's not simple Arabic, but so this have in mind. But it okay, this last one which we read it means puts very sharp border between people. So it considers some are Jews, some are not Jews. And then we're talking about Yemen. Again, is it these Jews are ethnically Jews and the other ones are monotheistics or monotheistic Jews, so they distinguish? It is a possibility because we have ethnic Jews there, most probably too. Because we said Yemen was prosperous, center of trade, um, or or all these these are considering both Arabs and everybody become Judah except Judaism, let alone ethnically Jew, not ethnically Jew. And then if that's the case, we know that some people were not they remain polytheistic. Although despite we don't get any inscriptions anymore. You know, from the time Himyar converted to Judaism, you don't get nearly any inscription which is polytheistic. We kind of discussed it last time. But other inscriptions are more general, people different ideas and background, except as the Lord Raḥmānān. And then, you know, on at the end of this, essentially, Southern Arabian languages means Al, so Ar-Rahman. So acceptance of the Lord as a God, Ar-Rahman, merciful or loving. And we know the Quran in the Surah Al-Isra is, I think verse 110 is mentioning, it doesn't matter whether you call it Allah or call it Ar-Rahman, all good names belong to him. And then Allah was the name the Northern Arabia, Northern tribes usually refer to supreme deity with. We remember we said, I mean, some are monotheistics, maybe they only have their own, uh, they accept other gods exist, but they only worship one God. But anyway, they believe in Allah as supreme being was there. So the northern tribes call it Allah, but the southern tribes, Yemenis ones, call it Raḥmānān. And this was a pervasive, Quran kind of, we have discussed this pervasive that in Quran says both are referring to the same entity. The other names we see is Elan, so Elan, is somehow related to Allah, God. And then we have Baal, which is Lord. And we have some even in prayers, Shi prayers, when Ba'alaha, we're referring Hazrat Fatima, some of the prayers referring to Imam Ali as Ba'alaha, as her husband. So these words are there, all as the one God. Um, Now, the other thing is this, the language of those inscriptions is mixed. First, the language of inscription in Yemen, South Yemen, is mostly Sabaic, the language uh, which was very common over there because the Sabaic civilization was dominant for a long time. So occasionally you may get Hebrew, occasionally you get the Greek, but the most of the inscriptions are Sabaic. So this one makes a little bit different too. Uh, we are not very clear again still how this Himyar kingdom converted to Judaism. Uh, how much sincere or real is, how much we have the same issue about these Khazarites, which converted north to Caspian Sea or the Mazandaran. It seems they converted to Judaism. So we have some story about their conversion because South were Muslims and West were surrounded by Christians. They want to keep their identity, so they convert Judaism. And most of the Jews, present day Jews, are from them. But okay, those Khazarites gradually become majority of the Jews are considered themselves part of the world Jewish community. But what are the Yemenites? Uh, these Yemenites, whether consider themselves from the wider Jewish world community, were there those ethnically Jews present before this Himyarites convert, which I think they did. They were. I'm pretty sure they were because those Yemeni ports were center of trade. What one interesting thing, which is very interesting for me, nowadays, conversion to Judaism is practically impossible. They accept people to convert, but they're not always grudgingly or not always you're considered equal. Okay, depend on your wealth and status. Maybe Ivanka is accepted to become Jew. But although some guy said her mother was really Jewish too, but putting that aside, the conversion is not easy. At first, it's not accepted really, but even accepted nominally or some way, like Sammy Davis or Elizabeth Taylor, all of those stuff to convert it. It is not easy. It's a long process, but it wasn't like this. And then you see conversion it seems very like similar to conversion to Islam. So I will read this. This passage was very interesting. However, it has to be remembered that conversion to Judaism was in antiquity and late antiquity a relatively simple effort before Islam. As mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud, we discussed about Talmud two Talmuds, one Babylonia, Jerusalem. A convert should be taught the basics of Torah. She or he should be baptized, which we have in Islam too. As in the case of male proselytes, he should take circumcision, which again we have to. After this, she or she be considered fully, totally Jewish, just like someone who had been born so. Look, that's exactly Islamic one. So it seems the conversion process, ancient times, exactly match how the conversion process Islam has been and is. But now they have made it absolutely difficult. However, there were also rabbinic voices, which was, as explained last time, gaining grounds, getting more powerful. And what we have is rabbinic Judaism. However, there were also rabbinic voices that preferred those born as Jewish to the proselytes in certain contexts. So being ethnically Jew, I mean, assuming born Jewish means you're ethnically Jewish, or somehow you have preferred to convert. So, but this passage was very interesting for me. Interestingly, the Jewish literary sources written outside Yemen do not mention a Jewish community there. That's a little bit surprising. And I mean, for now, I cannot dot the source here. And maybe because of the Himyar conversion. Yeah, that's surprising. Understandingly, why this would require more research. However, the Yemeni Jews did have contacts with the wider Jewish world. So it is not they were not in contact. But why? Okay, maybe accident, the records are lost. However, the Yemeni Jews did have contacts with the wider Jewish world, as epigraphic finds in Palestine attest. So they were going to pilgrimage. Remember, still the pilgrimage was very badly valued. There are inscriptions, there are three inscriptions in this regard. So it wasn't completely isolated that Southern Judaism. They at least travel the same way now Muslims around the world travel to, for example, from America travel for Hajj. So one gravestone epitaph, probably from Palestine, though its exact origin is uncertain, contain three languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, Sabaic. That's interesting because Hebrew is the religious one. Aramaic is most probably the language they were talking, if at least in Palestine or other that area, the language of Jesus was. Hebrew was technical, like biblical one. But Old Testament. Then Sabaic, because this person from Yemen. The Aramaic part notes that this is grave for Leah, daughter of Yehuda. The Hebrew part contains prayers of biblical inspiration. The Sabaic part is concise, invoking Raḥmānān, the god in Sabaic or some way, or at least keep that monotheism there, Raḥmānān. Calling Raḥmānān, that and Raḥmānān. The only consonants are written, the vowels are not there. So Raḥmānān, you have to understand. So that is interesting. Another one also, for example, Greek inscription was found in the graveyard at Bet Sharim in village in Palestine. Uh, and then it mentions of four Himyarites. So somebody have as Himyarite, that means from Yemen, has gone buried in Palestine. Maybe the same way somebody goes from America or Iran goes buried in Karbala, indicating Yemeni Jews were buried there. This inscription has been dated to 3rd or more likely 4th century. A 5th century Hebrew epitaph found in Zora, Jordan, mentions Yehush Ber I don't know, this Aufi or something, who died in Zafar, which is again in the land of Himyarites in South Yemen, but whose body was brought to Zoara in Jordan, be interred there. So this is a significant piece of evidence, Jews traveling from Yemen to North. They were not isolated, they were traveling. And all of this suggests to me, so they consider themselves as a wider Jewish world. This could be the ethnically Jews, which may be more committed to some of those rituals. I'm not sure necessarily that the converted Jews, the Himyarites, were not committed to the rituals, but at least it could be the case. Yeah, as I said, this inscription, although interesting, but we cannot, we are limited with inscriptions. It is impossible to say what sort of Jews the Arabians were, what role the Talmud and rabbinic learning play in their lives. We do not know. I mean, what we saw, it just tell us the South Arabian Jews had contacts with Palestine, maybe have some rabbinic learning as transmitted to them through the contacts, but all were speculative. Now, these we saw were not specific. These were inscriptions which are outside Yemen, the three we saw. And then just indicating, okay, there was some connections. We are going to see now the inscriptions which are mostly in the area of Yemen. Mostly will be Sabaic, but there are a couple we start maybe on non-Sabaic too. These inscriptions consist of both type, monumental, which are really commissioned, and non-commissioned graffiti. And then, as we said, we want them necessarily be dated either by the author and the one who inscribed it, or at least paleographically we can decide these are from 4th to the 6th century. Non-Sabaic ones, or very few, but it seems still a Greek text was found in Uh, Port of Ghani, which is now Bi'r Ali, is called in South Yemen. And the text is like this: invokes God with the formula is Theos, it's Greek word, Theos for God, and mentions Hagios Topos, which means sacred place, which most probably means a synagogue. So this is the Greek one, and then we have, these are Yemen, again, non-Sabai. A Hebrew inscription is found near Sana'a, but it's hard to read it, but at least shows, okay, even in ancient times, both Hebrew and Greek were present in Yemen, because the previous one we saw were outside in Yemen. Uh, okay. And now the one we have is this one, kind of similar, in some sense, the spirit's similar, the one we saw in North Arabia, but they're longer. So some of these are inscription with the building. They build buildings, maybe houses or I don't know, stores or for whatever reason. People usually invoke God, like we have the plaques Hazab min Fazl Rabbi or some other stuff. Uh, and then one of such inscription commissioned by an apparently elite members of the society reads as look, it's the name of the husband is not very clear, but his wife, I don't know, Martha or something like that. And then the son, then they were assistant to the king. So they were big, high level family. Constructed and laid the foundations and completed something Gayret, this type of construction, which is explained, but I don't think needed to go. And then Takrib is also TKRB is a city, a location. But then you see by the help of that, a, a you know, that's like Elon, that Elon God, the curse, the small circle reverse, and LN is Elon God. And then what is featured, you see this Rab Samamat is there a lot, or God of uh, Lord, God of Masters of Heaven. You see a lot in these phrases, and then so referring to Elon as the God, Master of Heaven, and then here we have the word of Lord, but this Lord is earthly Lord, is not referring to God. And with the help of the Lord, somebody maybe is referring to the king or somebody else in the month of so and the year of so, which is the 354 Common Era. So you see, it's referring to the God as Elon, and then the Master of Heaven. This is the two feature. So it's very common in the building inscription to note the construction was carried out with the help of God. The inscription also attests a common way depicting God as Master of Heaven. Baal, look, you see, this is Baal, Lord, as we said. Other Baal was the name of a god, which is very negative in Old Testament. This is an Arabic word. But is arch uh, as many Israelites, when it's wandering in the wilderness, sometimes start to worship Baal, Balaam also somehow, Balaam Baura is also joined to people worshiping Baal. So Baal is very the kind of from mythology of ancient mythologies, the Baal is there in those pantheon of old worship. Of yeah, that's the part. Maybe we can look at it. What is the Baal in ancient? But here doesn't have means Lord of Samain. So, and another one again the same way. This person, his wife, daughter of so and so, the sons so and so from the clan of so and so built and completed the houses with the help of Raḥmānān. So this time Raḥmānān. They always say like Hazam and Fazl Rabbi, something like that. And he built it in a year and year and so and so. So God helps, and in Him one finds solace. Though graffitis are somewhat rare in the late South Arabian corpus, but one is interesting one. This inscription is somewhat awkwardly written and some mistakes and repetition. So it's because graffiti maybe is not monumental, not commissioned. Description appears to mention two different people, assumed brothers. Hijr or Hajar or and Ben Salmat or something like that, and MRT then Ben Salmat. The graffiti begins with the name Hajr ibn Salmat, may Raḥmānān listen to his prayer. So, and then ليسمعن Raḥmānān. Although this is not Arabic. And then about the brother, the text only notes he made the pilgrimage, which is not a riot commonly mentioned in the description of monotheistic era. We're not sure which pilgrimage is it to Jerusalem or so on. So, but you see, we have Raḥmānān and some kind of pilgrimage and so on. Generally, as we said, these are mostly monotheistic. Many of them do not overtly proclaiming any religious specific religious affiliation. They keep it a little bit vague, contrary to the Ethiopians, which were very clearly open Christians. The Yemenite ones are a little bit, Himyars are a little bit hush hush. However, some inscriptions specifically mention Israel or other Jewish markers. And then if that's the case, should the generally monotheistic inscription also be classified as Jewish? Are we allowed to interpret non-Jewish ones, non-explicitly Jewish one as Jewish? Yes, but it's not certain because maybe people over there are belief identities in late antique Yemen could be diverse. But I'm more inclined, yes, because we don't see any polytheistic. If it's so much diversification, we should see other ones too. But they say those some monotheists maybe consider themselves Jewish purpose, others perhaps do not. So maybe some general monotheism without much commitment to the other aspects of Judaism. Remember, there are a few features of its of Sabbath or circumcision and so on. We recognize a few common universal features of Judaism. Some could have self-identified as God-fearer if this God-fearer may be related to Honafa. So let's see a little bit more of these ones. This is another one, 470 Common Era, is the construction text stating this is a little bit longer, or at least there is some feature in it. Yeah, so this again is talking about building, but it produced some confusion that maybe have two because that the building was put up with the help and the power of, so these guys mentioning this building again, it was put the help and power of the Lord Elon and the master of the heavens and of the earth. So this time now is Rabb Samawati wal Ard, which we have the phrase in Quran too, and with the help of their tribe, people of Sha'abahumu. I think is that is Behumu. And then remember that U is the feature of those language. Tribe of Israel. So Shabahumu Israel. So they built this by the help of Israel. Later in the description, God is also called Raḥmānān. And so here is called Elon, the master of heavens and the earth, and it's called Raḥmānān. Somewhat different pictures appear in another inscription, which appears to mention Raḥmānān and Israel God as two different divine beings. So the reading apparently says that, but then the authors and they say, I think we should take them one. So the text says like this: it's not that they have two gods. One is Raḥmānān, one is God of Israel. That wouldn't be very, I mean, that would change everything. But it seems it's not. May bless and be blessed the name. I think it's S, but Aleph is not there. Sorry, S of Raḥmānān, who is in heaven, and Israel and their God, va Israel, va Israel va ilahuhumu. So Israel and their God, the Lord of the Jews. Apparently, you're talking about Raḥmānān, the Lord of the Jews. But however, all other evidence points to the notion Raḥmānān is simply the attribute of divine name of God. So here, Raḥmānān maybe is the same Quran, have both could be name of God or attribute of God. Uh, I and then they conclude makes sense. Inscription does not mention two divine agent. That only seems because is one agent, but its syntax is very complicated. And then this one is the one we said earlier that really demarcate between Jews and non-Jews. Again, is not clear. Is it ethnic Jews uh, or not necessarily ethnic? If it's non-ethnic, then we have some people not Jewish, monotheistic Jewish. So an interesting example, again, which attempt to construct and maintain group boundaries is the important inscription and so on. So, which is rather longer inscription, 15 lines. It is not dated, but it's around the same area. It is about a graveyard. Uh, then it says near this rock, down to the border of the arable area, to bury in it the Jews. So this region is for the Jews. And with the assurance, the inscription, so with the assurance to avoid burying with them non-Jews, Ermim or Gentiles or something like that. This in order to fulfill their obligation toward the Jews. Toward the end of we had the same in northern part that one, remember last section, person have a family tomb and then really said even his children shouldn't sell the graves to a but there was family members, but kind of I think there were Jewish, the only few Jewish at the time. Toward the end of the text, it doubles down by mentioning the prohibition, the threat of the Lord of heaven and earth. So now he's Lord of heaven and earth to avoid burying a non-Jew on these plots. Yeah, this undergirds the idea that inhabitants of the Himyar kingdom were not all seen as Jewish, though even the Gentiles have adopted monotheism. So these guys may be ethnically Jewish because the other, I feel, as we hear, but these are not inscription sources. The conversion was large. So at least officially, nominally, tribes like the tribe of Hamdan, which the Husis are from, all are converted Judaism. As I said, most probably Huzaifa Yaman or the Yasser or all from Yemen, they were all converted. So at least their ancestry. So even the Gentiles had adopted monotheism, or so the surviving evidence suggests the tendency in this text to police borderlines is rare in South Arabian inscriptions. I might have to do the particular burial context, or they may be ethnically Jewish that don't consider the other ones fully Jewish. The construction, this is another example, they call it synagogue makrab or something like that. The construction of famous synagogue called Birik. This is from Baraka, but Brick, Barak, all these coming, the Baraka means blessed or something like that. So the brick in the capital kingdom of Mareb is mentioned in a few inscriptions. The synagogue is not extant. The stones of which inscriptions were found have been used in other buildings. But the 5th century construction text note says this synagogue was built for God, the Lord of heaven and earth, again, so that he might give them the honor of his name. Honor of Asma'ul Husna, or reverential fear as his name. This is Ismuhu, this is Shaps. I don't know what it exactly means. And the safety of their persons, their privileged members, and their vassals in war and peace, in Darm and Salm. So they want protection of him, honor of his name, safety of their persons, privileged members, their vassals in war and peace. And they built it in the year and so and so, and month. And then you see peace, peace, Salum and Salum, or Shalom. This is not Salum and Salum. So it's close to Shalom and Shalom, but this is as synagogue brick. And these and other inscriptions shows the formal organization of Judaism in Yemen. They have used other words for synagogue too. Another inscription mentioned Knesset. So the one we use, Kanisa, Quran used. So you see the words are ancient. Probably a reference to synagogue. One inscription mentions masjid, a place of prostration, a word cognated with the Arabian masjid, meaning mosque. And so these are, Semitic languages. It's not Arabic, it's Sabaik. Above it was noted a Greek inscription refers to synagogue with Hagios Topos, sacred place. Then it says here, may he forgive their sins and may he accept their offering, most probably God. And in the far and present world, this is interesting. It says in the far means hereafter, and the first mention is hereafter, and the present world, this world and the next, and the patron of Raḥmānān, goodwill of the lords and king, and pestilence, sickness, drought. Okay, some of it cannot be read, but we can see what he's doing. He's praying to God forbid evil from him and bless them. Uh, but yeah, the phrase which is important is this line two in the far and present world. وَالْعَالَمِينَ بَعْدًا غُرْبًا. So for the two world of close, far, ba'dan, غُرْبًا, close, indicates, I'm doing a kind of a close Arabic reading, but is close language but different. Indicates in passing the belief in the hereafter, so that's important. We have the sign of belief in hereafter. However, since the text is fragmentary, the exact meaning of this is difficult to decipher. Another text appears to corroborate the notion of the hereafter in the late antique Yemen. Remember, we have that poet has it, but that poet was a poem of him was so much, it seems, Islamicized, so much influenced by Quran and Islam. But these are inscriptions and South Yemen and separate. It is a build, because regarding Judaism, sometimes discussion that they don't believe in hereafter, they don't believe in resurrection. Some people claim they got it from Zoroastrians, this Western scholarship after the Babylonian captivity. Let's not go through that, but at least here it is clear. It is a building inscription commemorating the construction of houses by these person and his wife and their sons and daughters and their servants. And then the text says this is achieved by the grace of Raḥmānān. Zakat, zakat, yeah. Here, zakata means different than what we have. Ours is mostly purification, is grace of Raḥmānān. The interesting part comes in line 6 and 7 of that inscription, which we don't have the full text, which asks the Lord of heaven to save them from all harm and that he grant them a good death. Mota Sadqam. Like I think like Mota Sadqam, Mota Sadqam. A good death. That a good death does not necessarily entail that, but he says the good death does not entail the idea of here afterlife. But I think with the context and in this kind of Rahat al-Maut, we have the prayer, Rahat al-Maut. What's the prayer we do in the mosque? So I think it's that type of prayer. The good death does not necessarily entail the idea of afterlife. I think here it does. One assumes that it is implied. Yeah, one assumes that is implied. I agree. The text is dated by its writer to be 432 Common Era. Now, so this part kind of was the survey we had. Is not that much, but it's interesting. I mean, what you get at least is clear, it's not doubtful. And it gives the presence the Jews, maybe both ethnically and both monotheistic one, uh, belief in hereafter, some phrases, very similar phrases, and so on. This part is the historical part regarding still the even religious landscape of Arabia. This is we discuss in Quran Yemen because this is the whole issue related to martyrs of Najran and Abraham. But it's a new lecture series. This is a little bit different angle, a little bit brief. So I will go through it, maybe 20 minutes or a little bit more. If people haven't heard it, it's very interesting. If not, is another angle of what we said before. And then, you can consider the war between two religious community of previous Arabia, pre-Islamic Arabia, Jews and Christians. Although we haven't discussed the Christians, but this was a pivotal event, the whole thing, especially in Southern Arabia. So this we see. Look, as I said before, the Ethiopians had uh, territorial ambition in respect to Yemen. Before to the conversion to the Christianity and before the conversion of Himyar to Judaism or establishment of their kingdom, Ethiopia invaded Yemen and it was in control of it. But then, and then we have inscriptions about that, which is much earlier, about second century AD, but they have to retreat back. But still, they have that dream. Like now in Turkey, people have the dream of reviving Ottoman Empire. That's exactly that ambitions of Ethiopia always was, and Yemen was many aspects similar. At least environmentally, geographically, and it was prosperous trade routes. And if Ethiopian Empire could control that, would be much important for them. Uh, but uh, uh, the Himyarite kingdom start to weaken. It was Jewish. It was strong for 200 years and more. But when we reach beginning of the 6th century, uh, for the reason which are not very clear, is weakened and collapsed. I think maybe some of the trade routes, some maybe Christian colonies grow in Najran or other places. So that is some of its population convert to Christianity. Maybe some inner rivalries between the three main branching of Yemen, which nowadays even we see them between south and north and a little bit east of Yemen is differences. Um, Maybe between those who part of Sabaic tribes, between Hazaramots and Himyarites, they have all the stronghold cities. Always there is rivalry. Something weakened that kingdom, and that raised to intervention of Ethiopians in this southern Yemen, and then uh, so. So we see some wars. So let's go through that. 6th century witnessed a number of wars between Jewish Yemen and Christian Ethiopia. This one we have good inscription evidence. According to epigraphic evidence, both sides saw fighting as religiously sanctioned and invoked the help of God as having procured victory on the battlefield. And occasionally each side was victorious. In 518, about 52 years before the birth of Prophet Muhammad, or 100 years, a little bit less, 90 years before his birth. In 518 or thereabouts, the Ethiopian Negus king raided Yemen. This only led to a short Ethiopian occupation at first. However, the Ethiopians appear to have built churches and endeavored to promote Christianity. I felt the churches, this is a little summarized. Churches were established earlier. We discussed it when we discussed the Yemen Quran. But for now, this summarized story is good. They add new churches, new influences, especially to some port cities. Now, one of the last Himyar kings converted to Christianity. And not only converted to Christianity, changed his alliance. At that time, Yemen, before Himyar conversion, before his conversion, when Himyar was Jewish, there was an alliance with the Persian Empire. There were in the allies of Persian Empire, like Kenda Kingdom, which, as I said, in the Central Arabia was most ally of Persian Empire. The Jews have more affinity with the Persian Empire, and then you see at the time of beginning of Islam, Mushrikeen of Mecca also feel more closer to Sassanid Empire. Then we have the other alliance, Roman empires, Ethiopic Aksum Empire, and then you remember also Lakhmids were with Persia, and then we have Ghassanids and the people of Medina. Because, the people of Medina, tribal wise, were close to Ghassanids. And some of them moved from Medina, occasionally go to the Ghassanid court, serve in the armies, like Lebanese moving from Lebanon to US and back and forth and so on. So this Ethiopian king, like the situation happened in Syria, not only convert his religion, change his alliance, going from the camp of Persian to the camp of Romans, siding with Romans and Ethiopians with Ethiopians. Then this was not felt well with some of the nobles of uh, the kingdom, and then they rebelled. That part which wasn't clear whether he died, they rebelled, or they rebelled and killed him, because some part of it is a little bit vague. And then uh, one of the grouping, which is mostly actually like now there's Southern Yemen, they're close to Southern Yemen, and they're more from Hazaramot, which his name is Yusuf As'ar Yas'ar, which later is known as Zonavas, the one with the swinging lock of hair. He get the control, and then he fight against the Ethiopians, the Christianizing trend, and then he was able to push them back. So he was very ardent Jewish person, and he pushed those Ethiopic and the Christian supporters back out. And then he attacked and massacred Christians in Najran and other places. And then, as we discuss, this massacre is narrated to some chronicles. We partially discussed them, and then we can see the summary here, which says, for example, after some time, the Himyari Jews back stronger. The Christian king whom the king of Ethiopia has established, there died. They assume he's died, not killed. The Jews choose a king from among themselves over the people of the Himyarites, and in bitter wrath slew and destroyed all the Christian people, their men and women, young people, little children, poor and rich, which Quran referred to that Ashab al-Ukhdud. So this is narrated in an 8th century Syriac chronicle. This is a little bit late, but a so-called pseudo-diagnosis of Talmahre narrates the following about the story. The authors give Western scholarship again here a little bit suspicious, but we discussed that detail. We don't go to, some of it's correct, some of it a little bit maybe added to it. But the information about the persecution massacres are attested well enough to contain some historical truth. We discussed that before in that lecture series. It is not only often much later literary works that we have to resort to, but the good part is that we have inscriptions. If it was an inscription, all of this would be done. But there are 2 or 3 very important inscriptions regarding the events during this time, from each side. It is not only often much later literary works that we have to resort to, but in fact, King Yusuf's Zonavas, army commander called Shurahbil ibn Yaqbul, commissioned inscriptions celebrating his deeds. So one of the generals of this King Yusuf, which was Zonavas, was Jewish and rebel and pushed Ethiopians out, had made an inscription, which we have it, and lists what his achievements are. And this famous inscription is numbered like this, mentions the following. The inscription is fully extant, and we can read it very carefully. Look, might the God to whom belong the heavens and the earth. So you see, this time it doesn't say Lord of Samawat wal Ars, Malakut Samawat wal Ars, or it says belongs. Bless the King Yusuf As'ar Yas'ar, so his blessings is king, the king of all the tribes. And might God bless the guileless commanders. And then write some names, and then you have Shurahbil ibn Yaqbul is here, and lists the genealogy. And then these are from clan of Yazan, is the one in Hazaramot, which this clan of Yazan was a little bit maybe unhappy in the alliance of Hazaramot, which produced the king Himyar. But anyway, that's not our concern. It's the general lineage and connection. The supporters of the Lord, the King Yusuf As'ar Yas'ar, when he burned the church. And interestingly, this is mentioned here, that burned the church. This Western scholarship were producing doubt regarding the Ashab al-Ukhdud. But anyway, killing the Abyssinians and Zafar. Remember, we heard the Zafar too, and moved the war against so-and-so. And brought the war against the defense of Najran. So he's talking about Najran. He reinforced the chain of Mandab. They were with him, and he sent them with an army. What the king has managed to get this expedition and spoils amounted to 12,000 deaths and 11,000 prisoners. They surrendered Najran. Then I think they entered the city, and then we did massacre, killed 12,000 deaths and 11,000 prisoners. Other numbers a little bit embellished. 299,000. This is huge. 290,000 camels seems huge. And cows and small animals. Okay, maybe. But still seems huge. This inscription was written by so and so when he was guard against Najran with the tribe of Hamdan. Look, tribe of Hamdan is the tribe Husis are from. When he was in the guard against Najran with the tribe of Hamdan, and then this tribe was a very important supporters of Imam Ali, and we can assume they were Jewish at that time. citizens and nomads and the assault troops of this group and the Arabs of Kenda. So it mentions Arab of Kenda. And then you see these Yemenis, Himyarites, consider Kenda, which is inside Arabia, a little bit different than Yemenis. They call them Arabs of Kenda. Murad, Ibn Muljam is from Murad, Hujib Ati is from here, Mashaj, another big tribe. These are all big tribes present in Kufa and the supporting Imam Ali, these tribes. While the Qails, his brothers were with the king, were mounting guard. So you see the names are there, the names are contemporary, and then these are considered a little bit different. At least these Himyarites consider them a little bit different. For example, we call one Gilaki and Mazani. Maybe from one's perspective, they're the same, but well, from their own perspective, they're different. Okay, this is a little long, but let me read and see how much time we have because I want to get. Okay. On the coast against the Abyssinians while they were enforcing the chain of Mandab. So there is something here about the port, which I don't know, his defense was chain or so on, like Istanbul. That is all what they mention in this inscription. That's booty, garrison service, and all what happened in only one expedition. And then it's going, okay, maybe we can go faster. So it's explaining everything. But then here it says, for the protection of the heavens and the earth and of the strength of the man was this inscription against those who would harm and degrade. So this kind of prayer is put in this inscription for protection. Might Raḥmānān, the highest, protected against all those who would degrade. This inscription was placed, written, executed in the name of Raḥmānān and by the Lord of the Jews. So here called Raḥmānān, the Lord of the Jews. So the Jewishness is emphasized and by the highly praised. And a number of significant details are mentioned in Inscription. It links the massacres of the Christian and the burning of their church to the general war against Ethiopia. The warfare in general described as having been in defense of God and Judaism. These even led to a new and much more vigorous Ethiopian attack on Yemen. Then now Ethiopia counterattack. And this time very powerfully. They defeat the Zonavas, the king, in which the army of Yusuf As'ar was defeated, and another campaign in 530. And notably, the Byzantine helped the Ethiopians in this invasion. Okay, that's not certain, but it's a rumor that, okay, Byzantine sent a dispatch. The first one, the story is that when the massacre in Najran happened, they sent a delegate to Rome that come and help us. And the Roman king was busy and said, I cannot do it. Send a delegate to Ethiopian king. You go help them. But we think Ethiopian king, no matter what, would go help because this kind of unsettled everything. And there are some questions whether this whole Byzantine story is correct, but still, there's alliances, and definitely Byzants were apprehensive, and especially as we will see, because of the Persian influence. Notably, the Byzantine, the Ethiopians helped Ethiopia's invasion. The campaign of 530 is remembered as an important inscription. Okay, so we have now an inscription from the other side, 530. This first one was around 523, which they committed the massacre, and from the Himyarite or Yazan tribe of Himyarite, from the Jewish one. Now we have the other side. Okay, the names are a little bit hard to read. I did it last time somewhere else, but it's hard to read. But because the listing is important, but so and so wrote this inscription. They say fortress of this. Yeah, they wrote inscription in this fortress. They repaired its walls, its gates, its cisterns, in routes of entry when they are fortified in it. They came back from the land of Abyssinia, and the Abyssinians sent the army to the land of Himyar when they killed the king of Himyar and his army commanders. And Raḥmānites, which that's interesting, maybe referring to some Jewish leaders, but although this is a little hard to explain because usually means Christian. This we have to see another context. The month of So and the year of So. No matter what, this inscription clearly suggests the end of era of the Himyarite rulers had come. By this defeat, Himyarite kingdom's gone. They uh, they so one kingdom after one goes to Christianity, the other ones rebelled, they get control, but Ethiopian attacked, completely destroyed, and then start to rule themselves. The Ethiopians start to rule Yemen by themselves. The Ethiopian and Christian presence in Yemen was strengthened, and the Himyari dynasty was supplanted. They, as we see, Ethiopian king installed Abraham, the famous Abraham. As we will see in the next lecture, though Christians were present in Yemen before the Ethiopian occupation, their numbers probably soared because of it. The Ethiopian influence is also present in other ways too. Ethiopic words, in particular, those having to do with religion, which some find their way in Arabic and some of them find in the way Quran, like Havariyun and some other words which we have regarding especially Christianity in Quran most probably seems coming from Giyaz and the language of Ethiopian people. But the story still continues because the ruler which the Ethiopian king put over there, Abraha, was a unique person, which I went to the detail in Quran in Yemen. He was a slave in Ethiopia, rise to the command, and then when he come to Yemen, he got somehow persuade the Ethiopian soldiers and other people, and he rebelled and kind of start to rule independently. Ethiopian king sent the army to defeat him, to put him under control, but the army was defeated. The dispatched army from Ethiopia was defeated. So somehow they have to accept the semi-independence of the Abraha. So Abraha is a Christian coming from the Ethiopic side, but maybe whether he's Ethiopian ethnically or so on is a little complicated. But he kind of de facto ruler, like all those semi-independent dynasties, Iran, Tahirian, Safarian, and so on. So and then we don't want to go his rule because it takes about 30 years. You can call it about 535 to 565 around sometime, 30 years. For a while, he's consolidating. He did lots of campaigns. He expanded the jurisdiction of go beyond the Himyarite kingdom. He consolidated and could control all the Himyarite kingdom and moved to inside Arabia, the kingdom, captured some stuff, and is on his way to put many inscriptions. So we have inscriptions from him. I think total of 12, I remember, are somehow related to him, 8 or 12. Maybe I forgot what the number is. His name is there. And then there are different places, there are interesting information they give. But let's ignore Abraham because our story is not that, and he's a Christian. Maybe next time we'll see it. He launched many campaigns on parts of Arabia, celebrating his deeds and inscription. One expedition was remembered later in Islamic tradition as the Year of Elephant. There was some discussion about this, but I think some of those is resolved. Even though there is no contemporary evidence that Abraham raided Mecca, as Arabic literature recounts, but we'll see that there are evidence he conquered Medina, which when he conquered Medina, most probably you passed near Mecca. The Islamic tradition claims that Prophet Muhammad was born in that year, but this does not seem to be anything other. And this is the Western idea that maybe confluence of two events that were later deemed highly significant. And now, I explain it when I do those lectures. No, they're close. They're really close. Maybe it's not exactly 570, but we have inscriptions and we have the outline of his regime. And then after that, even the Amul Fil with the Suratul Fil has came and his army was destroyed, not himself. His kingdom is very much weakened and he died very soon. And his two sons, which have their name in inscriptions, maybe they get the power. We have the name inscriptions where they're crown prince, not the king. But maybe get the power, but the rulership is so weak that now the Jews decide, the Yemeni Jews want to rebel, and they seek the help of Persians, but the Persians this time decide to come and rule themselves directly. So this is the new chapter. So you see, but as this one, however, one Sabbaic inscription commissioned by Abraha, this a little goes before what I said. However, one Sabbaic inscription commissioned by Abraham, Maraghliin, notes that he attacked and conquered Yathrib, later Medina, or at least its hinterlands. So this is important, the way of, because they start say there is no, they said the timing is not right, some inscription. There was another inscription by him. They thought that is referring to Amophil, but then Amophil would become 15 years earlier, 17 years earlier, the way traditional Muslims recording it, which actually is more complicated. Maybe there were some narrations like that. But now this new one is fine and more or less pushing the whole even closer to that, what traditional Muslims said. That is, his army was present in the center Hijaz, which is not usually a hospitable place. Well, no, not many people want to conquer it, especially from north. Rarely all these Persian, Roman, other conquerors decide to come in because they were scared from desert. But Yemenis coming from south, so they know the situation better. And then there are that Hujri, their kingdom there. So he conquered them. He go even far. He would go as far as northeast near Hira, where he go very north. But he when he go into Medina, definitely from Yemen, you pass or close by Mecca. And so other the events, maybe they don't record it in inscriptions, maybe it's a defeat or loss or return, but the events are there. So they add, perhaps this is the raid later. Remember, that's the year of elephant, and included an attack on Mecca as well. Indeed, the Sabaetic inscription evidence many attempts by the Southern Arabian kings and commanders to control Arabic speaking and possibly other groups of the north and use them as auxiliary force. So many other Sabaetic inscription, we have other kings, other people, Himyarites for a long time wanted to control that central and South Yemen, Arabia. So it's natural Abraham does that. And this is maybe this inscription because also imported from some other religious aspect related to Quran. The king, okay, the king Abraham, Zabiban, king of Saba, and then he lists the kingdoms is controlled. This is important. King of Saba, king of Raizan, Hadaramot, Yemenat, and after Arabs, or Arabahumu of Taudam, and so these regions wrote this inscription when he came back from the country of Ma'ad. That's inside Arabia. I had the map. Maybe next time I show it to you. We show it in the Quran Yemen series. He took possession of the Arabs of these regions, drove them out. He took possession of all the Arabs and so on. And this is the tribe. And then here you see Yasrib. So it seems he claimed he conquered Yasrib and gets booties and ghanima from them. Time, uh, and then he doesn't list Mecca. So it says maybe they have to go back. Abraha title in description appears as the Beeman, or in others could also be a slip of engraver. They discuss some of it about. Uh, this title probably be understood who is in Yemen. So the Yemen is who's in Yemen or who's in the ruler in Yemen. Abraha is the last ruler of Yemen mentioned in pre-Islamic epigraphic record. Actually, he's the best. He have other inscriptions, one big pillar, 2 meter tall pillar, fourth side of it, all inscriptions. His sons are mentioned, but they maybe have ruled after him, but there is no one mentioned, so it means the kingdom is finished, really. I mean, Himyarite, which collapsed, and Abraham started to rule. His name is mentioned in inscriptions. He's the last king. The political upheavals of 6th century ultimately lead to the situation where other foreign powers also try to build influence in Southern Arabia. Khosrow I, Anushir I, Sasani Persia was able to conquer areas in Eastern Arabia, reaching in Yemen as well. So during this period, maybe Romans were busy and the turmoil, they were weak. Khosrow decided to land directly rule Yemen, not through an alliance with those Yemeni tribes. So by 575, a little bit after the birth of Prophet Muhammad, the Persians had conquered the whole of Yemen and expelled the Ethiopian troops. So completely the Abraha, his kingdom, his children, and Ethiopia were kicked out. Of the Persian era, we unfortunately know very little because the epigraphic evidence for some reason becomes silent. They don't carve epigraphs. You see it's a culture change. We have Abraha, we have other ones, nothing from the Persian era. We only know this from later Arabic historiography with only a few mentions in more contemporary Byzantine historiography. The 6th century was where it seems taxing to the population of Yemen, leading to impoverishment and a fall in literary culture. That could be, and lasted until the early Islamic period when new culture and literature expressed in Arabic emerges. So you don't see many inscriptions anymore. The Sabaik on any form, not the Persian period, which is a long time. It's not that short, you know. We're talking about 575, 25 here. At least you're talking about good 50 years, but there's nothing there. Uh, but this doesn't suggest that Jewish and Christian communities would have suffered during Sassanid rule. Uh, though Ethiopian troops were driven out, the local Christian population survived. On the eve of Islam, Yemen was possibly majority Jewish with the size of a Christian minority. This one I don't know, but it could be. It could be. This we have to look at Islamic books, which one. But okay, I go with. But I was thinking maybe Christianity's growth, maybe sizable. Okay, now. So this covered our description of inscriptions. And you see, there was some information that were good, but disjointed. Not many, but when we have is relatively certain. The names are certain, ideas are certain. But I want to at least address two other topics. I try to be fast, that at least get a taste of, okay, if we go to the this not this only inscription primary sources to go into the secondary non-contemporary literature, the Muslim sources, literary sources, what we get, history sources. You see, you get a lot of material, but soon become contradictory, sometimes confusing. There are truth in them, but sometimes you shouldn't accept on face. The one question I ask, even I really give up in it because then start to go many, many wide and uh, somehow fancy stories is what is this origin of the Jews of Yathrib? And again, we see after all, still is not very clear. This is one question I would do, and couple of I try to be fast. Maybe by 9 we're done, and then also some example again about the ritual or religious worship of Medinan Jews. So the origin ethnic nature of the Jews in Hijaz and particularly Yathrib, Medina are a puzzling matter, and the modern students has difficulty in trying to solve the problems involved. And then this is not a new modern problem. Moderns have understood. Even ancient sources, Islamic sources, classic sources notice there is something is not very clear here. Quite interestingly, the sources we possess about those Jews, which are Muslim ones, are aware of these difficulties and do their best to present us the different versions with all their variations. Yeah, these parts from now on are written by two actually Jewish and Israeli sources. So there are two sources I relied on. One is Mushagil and the other one Haggai Mazuz. They are both Israeli Jews, so see the wording and so on. Both Talmudic and Islamic tradition are quite unanimous in describing a Jewish population which inhabited the southern east part of Palestine. Look, this is after Roman destroyed Palestine and Jewish were dispersed. And then you find them Jews in Europe, you find in Persia, you find many different places. But okay, still some of them live in Palestine. And Islamic sources and Talmudic sources both say the Jews are living in southern eastern parts of Palestine, and including Transjordan, and then some of them, the regions they live have common border with the Bedouin tribes, which usually consider Arabic regions like Tay or those nomadic tribes or Arabs live over there. For example, the cities like Jericho, Al Khalil, Soar, Eilat, that port near the Red Sea, and their surroundings form the northern edge of this Jewish area. So they have Jewish tribes here which stretch into the Arabian Peninsula, starting from the valley of the villages Wadi al-Qura, which according to Muslim tradition represented the border between Hijaz and Sham. So, you know, the Hijaz is area in Arabia, and then there was an area, they call it Shamat, which is Palestine, Syria, and so on. And then Wadi al-Qura was the border. So, and then, as we said, this Jewish presence come to Yathrib. We said that most of the cities north of Yathrib, like we have Khaybar, Ola, and Hej, are other Jewish city or heavy Jewish presence. They do mostly agriculture. They're walled cities. They have control much of the trade. And then it goes beyond northern west of Arabia, goes to that South Palestine area. So both Talmudic sources and Islamic sources more or less agree. Uh, uh, and then the Jewish character of this said area can be seen from the Hebrew designation Darum, maybe from Dar, but Dar, the Hebrew word Darum, used like Darul Harb, Darul Islam, the land of Islam, the land of war. Darum used in the early Muslim sources for southern Palestine. So Muslims sources use the same terminology as the Jews use it, but this is Ibn Ishaq, I think the reference, and Ibn Ishaq ancestry were Jewish, so you always be a little bit cautious, maybe whether Muslim will use it or the actual word. But okay, so we can agree. Then one interesting thing is this: the literary sources are reinforced by the epigraphical findings. Of a special interest is the inscription published by 1965 in Madan and Saleh, which actually this is what we saw before, the one we saw last lecture. It was the funerary inscription of the tomb erected by Adnan Bar Horn and Bar Shamuel. And then, we saw that this is for his wife, and then there were wife died earlier, and then mentioning two local leaders, which we saw in Hajj and Taima, where the name was Shamuel and the leader of the community. So the inscription, which apparently dates around AD 319, and we saw it, we don't see any inscription in Northern Arabia of this form of after beginning of 6th century. The inscription even maybe a little bit earlier, 4th century. The inscription apparently dates from this, if the country begins, and then the dating and so on, we don't need to go through that. But you see, so we saw last lecture, there are inscriptions from North Arabia, which clearly emphasize and proves that Jews were present in North Arabia. We saw more than one inscription, so I don't need to go through that. And Muslim traditions, and then, as I said, some of these Jewish Israeli Jewish scholars also take them more seriously. The difference on the Western counterparts. Yeah, among these modern scholars, academic scholars, the Jewish Israeli ones take Muslim sources more seriously and they're less critical, maybe because they're used to the type of uh, narrations they find here in their own sources. They know how it works, how it is. But they also take it seriously without not necessary criticism and take ideas out of it. For example, like Lecker has tried to reconstruct the history of Jews at Medina, have done a lot. This is minute work. But at least Muslims, the sources seems indicate the first group settled in Yathrib were Jews, not Aus and Khazraj were the Jews, and start to do agriculture. And when they came, we don't know. Maybe they came just. My idea is that after the Roman exiling them from Palestine, they must move down here mostly. So it wasn't that old, but it's oldest. It's first century AD. Because then Aus and Khazraj, which are Yemenis essentially tribes, they came into these area after the dam in Marib was destroyed and the agriculture in Yemen is damaged and they have to move up. And so they're all, and they know agriculture, they're latecomer, they come here and they start to settle these oases and mostly work for the Jews in their land. They have the better land, the better places in the whole Yemen, Medina, they have better water, better irrigation and better uh, uh, the property of the land was much better. Okay, so Muslim traditionally could not think of any earlier settlers in Yathrib than the Jews. As a matter of fact, some of them mentioned suddenly you bring stories from the Jewish culture, Amalekites as earlier inhabitants, which Amalek is related to Palestine. Some of them read the Bible and mix them the places. This part is myth. Really, the historical ones all said these guys are the first who were destroyed by the Banu Israel who inherited the place. So repeating the same story which happened in Palestine, Sinai Peninsula, in Medina, which doesn't make sense. Who were destroyed by the Banu Israel who inherited the place. That is mixed sources. Some people say the right thing, some people say something nonsense, and the sources put them side by side. We have to be judicially select him. But no historical value contributed to this kind of information, which is obviously pure imagination based on the well-known biblical story. But what is true is that the Jews are the first settlers in Medina. We don't know exactly where they came from, again, after all. But the Jews are described as the first inhabitants of the agricultural strips of the land in northern Hijaz. They always, everywhere they do that, Khaybar, Ola, and in Yathrib and its vicinity, they were those who dug the wells, planted the palm trees, practiced every kind of farming, and also those who built the houses and also castles. Or they are the only real historical settlers known by Muslim sources. Farming, settling properties, crafts, these were concepts represented by the Jews, as against the Arabs who were Bedouin, nomads, and so on. In the board of, now we go to the second, later Islamic sources. For example, Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, the master of intrigues of Bani Ghatafan, who acted for the Muslims during the Battle of Khandaq, is one big tribe in Hijaz. The Bani Qurayza were people of high lineage and of properties, whereas we were but an Arab tribe who did not possess any palm tree nor vineyards, being people of only sheep and camel. Yeah, there were people of sheep and camel, and maybe some of them work in these agricultural lands for the Jewish owners. The Bedouin used to be hired by the Jews during harvest period. Yeah, exactly as I said. At the time of date harvest, they would come with their camels and transport the bunches of trees. So the camels works for this, to transportation of water or dates of the villages for sale. And it says taking the half revenue for themselves in the view that was unpleasant labor overall. And then, so that is one tribe, the Bani Qurayza, and the another one is explanation again. Bani Nazir and Bani Qurayza are described as kings, muluk over Medina, ruling the Aus and Khazraj, in addition to a governor, Amil, appointed by Marzuban of the Badouin, who would collect their kharaj for him. Okay, Marzuban is the Persian name, Marzban. I think, I will see a little bit next slide. It seems they have to pay taxes. The Medinan people and some of these Bedouins should pay taxes with the Persian governorate in Yemen. So it seems that governorate in Yemen had somehow subdued, not maybe necessarily Mecca, we are not sure about that, but some inner areas of Arabia. We see another relative explanation. So in some sense, there was some guy, which is maybe they must see the tax collector. There was no barak present, there was no king present, there was no army present, but there was a tax collector now and then, occasionally once a year, twice a year, come and collect taxes. And it's somewhat maybe he talked with the Jews of the city and they collect the tax, or also the Bedouins around the city have some representative, they gather and they pay the taxes. The tradition quoted by Samhudi from Nesheppa relates that it was the Jews who would stand on the guard at the gates of Yathrib and demand teeth from any person wishing to enter the city. Okay, this is I'm not sure how it is maybe earlier, but it seems, and yu'ashiruhu, so they get a tax for people want to get the city. It's uh, maybe their quarters, maybe the whole city, and yu'ashiru means a tenth of it, so we have to see what exactly is this. This general picture seems to have still prevailed at the time of Prophet arriving in Medina. This part of it, Persian suzerainty based on the Jews of Medina being strengthened by the victory of Byzantium. So it seems we haven't heard this much when we hear about the story of Mecca and Medina, but in some sense, that city is paying some kind of tax to the Persian rulers in the south. This appears to lend credibility to Muslim tradition, which have the also, okay, this is another direction. Muslim tradition says some person called Ibn Rasul Jalut, Jalut, and I don't know why they use Talut and Jalut. I mean, but Ibn Rasul Jalut, the son of Ixtiderek. So this guy was the son of the biggest religious Jewish authority in Babylonia. Uh, Came to Medina or is present in Medina. They claim, but this part of the story makes it a little bit unreliable. Discussing with the Prophet the matter of the names of the stars in Joseph's dream. I mean, I don't know what's the name of the star Joseph's dream. Is it the brothers they mean or some stars? But the idea is that, which make a Lecker use it, is this. because Muslim sources use the right titles and write the name of who was the leader or the son of the leader of the Jews in Babylonia. And they have recorded correctly, which is named Boslana, something like that. So the claim is that they have brought him from Babel, near, for example, Kufa, near Baghdad, to Medina when Prophet came over there to show him, okay, this is Prophet Muhammad, a new person. He's claiming he's Prophet. So there must be some contact, but okay, how much we don't know. The tradition reflects two facts: the connection of Medina Jews to the Babylonian center and their influential position in the Hijaz, reinforced by the connections and apparently back the world power of the time, Persia. So they have connection with Persia too. They collect the taxes. They may connect with Babylonia too, and that Babylonia is under influence of the Persians too. They say the Prophet, Islamic sources address the Medina Jews and kinsfolk and offspring of the ancient Bani Israel. If that's true, then these Bani Israel are Jewishly ethnic, which I really think all the behavior of Bani Qurayza, Bani Nazir, uh, Bani Ninira, it looks like that. And then I said, one guy said they're Kohen, so is there like Sadat, they're the type of people they could serve in the temple. I really, their attitude, their behavior suggests they're not Arabs to convert to Judaism. They're really ethnically Jews. There is some sense of superiority in their attitude. They spoke a language of their own, which Muslim source called Ratan. This is a little bit interesting. It says apparently meaning a non-Arabic tongue. Tabari says Persian, which I really don't know what he means. Maybe some form of Aramaic, which the Persian administrative people use it. But this last information is important. We hear it in other cases too. So they were talking their own language. It wasn't Hebrew. It wasn't Hebrew. They say it's non-Arabic, but it must be Semitic. And I don't know why Tabari says Persian. The Prophet ordered Zayd ibn Sabit, which is the famous Katib, and then maybe later on collector of Quran, which worked with the three caliphs, to teach himself at Suryaniya. So Zayd was raised with them. He was orphaned and raised with them, and then this is Syriac. Suryaniya is Syriac, a dialect of Aramaic. So we know that the Prophet asked him to learn Syriac, and then he learned it in 3 weeks, or here 17 days. So that means the language is very close, and then he maybe know because of schooling some Hebrew, because we know he schooled with them, and that's why he was also Katib. He could read and write, and and then he was close to them too. So that maybe this is a dialect of Aramaic, and then because here emphasized to know what Jews are writing. So maybe is Suryaniya or Aramaic is what they wrote, but the dialect they talk, which I don't know what it is, was different, but it was different than Arabic. They do that, you know. We have in Cairo they wrote Arabic with the Hebrew script. Uh, we have the same Ladino. This kind of things. Long story. Uh, based on the sources we see is cultural difference between Jews of Yathrib and Bedouin. There were two separate divisions in the population of northern part of Arabian Peninsula. So you could clearly see side by side they're different. One group Arabs are Bedouins, and the one other one is Jews. And then where exactly they come from is not very clear. We don't know exactly the time of the arrival. Okay, some make it mythical. They come after Noah flood. Some they come after Moses' expedition against Amalekites. Some say after David and Solomon. You see, these are just conjecture. Some after destruction of temple by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar as the first temple, the Babylonian exile, and then Cyrus let them go back to Palestine. And there are tradition putting the Jewish migration into Hijaz at the time of destruction of Second Temple, which I think this is a correct one. Okay, so I have a little short time. I want to go fast. Is this? This was the origin, again, Muslim sources, and I cut it because from now here, wild conjecture and so on. But the same also about the custom. One is about Sabbath. We said what one really feature which identified Jews, well, all different views at different locations, is observing Sabbath. And then there are some stories related Muslim sources, later sources, Arabic sources, which shows this. But again, we have to show how much of it is true. For example, it says in 627 Common Era, when the Muslims besieged Bani Qurayza, the Jews were outnumbered and military inferior to the Muslims. The leader Ka'b ibn Asad wanted to carry out a surprise attack against the Muslims on the Sabbath. Maybe get them off guard like these guys do, that coming out of the castle and attacking when maybe Muslims also anticipate they didn't do anything on Saturday. But other their lives were in danger. So you see this from the Jewish perspective. The Bani Qurayza refused because they did not want to violate the Sabbath. But also there could be a story to say these are very true Jews, stick to the religion no matter what. But because we see other cases not simply like that, actually the dispute, actually Quran mentions the whole issue of the Surah Al-Ma'idah, which mentioning that eye for eye, teeth for teeth, something like that, regarding the justice must apply equally to everybody, not discriminating and so on, was that these Bani, I think either Bani Nazir and Bani Qurayza, one of them was better lineage, and then when one of them killed the other one member of the other one, the one which is a lower lineage was punished by being killed. But the other one, which is upper lineage, have done committed murder, will not be killed, but only have to pay the blood money, and then even half of the price. So I'm not saying they're always, and the Quran kind of rebuked them, you're not following their religious law. So it's not that they're always so committed to the religious law, but at least it's depicted like that. So they do not came out on Sabbath. There are examples in Islamic sources that there are two Jewish converts to Islam that they want to continue observing Sabbath after conversion. The name is Abdullah ibn Salam, which is again famous, the first Jewish convert to Islam, and several other Jewish converts asked Prophet Muhammad for permission to observe the Sabbath and read Torah the following their conversion. Prophet Muhammad forbid them. Uh, Prophet was regarding Torah and bringing other scripture, rightly was sensitive because it would mess up everything. And also there is a story that Safiyyat ibn Huyay, which was the chieftain of the Khaybar, and then Safiya become the wife of the Prophet. And there's stories, some people said she poisoned Prophet, but Prophet survived. Some people said that poison caused the disease or weakness the body Prophet caused his passing away, but we are not sure. But then the image about the Safiya is very mixing. Sometimes they say she was a very pious Muslim, and then we have a recent research which kind of bring some questions on the image made from Safiya was contradictory, and one of these contradictory is in the time of Omar, the people observed one slave lady observed Safiya is observing Sabbath. So in the sense maybe she has remained Jewish. And then we have some examples of it, because she was wife of Prophet, they paid good from the Beit Mal, from the treasury, and then how she willed it. All of them is for kind of benefit of Jewish people, Jewish stuff. This is detail. But this story at least said many years later, some lady accused her she's observing Sabbath. They go to Omar, and Omar check with her. And she said, no, I'm not observing Sabbath. My Sabbath is not Friday, it's not Saturday. So the authors use, okay, the Sabbath is important. The other one is fasting. I don't go through the slides, just say 2 minutes. Look, we have this issue of fasting on Ashura. And then, so the story they narrate, and then some Muslim sources copied and Western sources copied, especially Sunni sources, which when Prophet come to Medina, notice, the Jews are fasting on the day of Ashura, and then ask them why you are doing fasting day of Ashura, and they said, okay, this is the day upon which God, I don't know, they told the Prophet, or Prophet said, this is the day upon which God, the hadith which is narrated of Ibn Abbas says, uh, maybe Prophet inquired from them, or they're before inquiring, know what is the occasion is. But Prophet says this was the day upon which Allah drowned the soldiers of Pharaoh, so Moses fasted on it. And we have a better right to Moses than you. And he fasted in order the people fast with him. Shia doesn't believe this. Make much of these occasions because Ashura is the important day of martyrdom of Hussein, and then Sunnis do fast, but they take it reward and they make hadiths, and this is the origin of it. The Jews are fasting, uh, and the Prophet saw that, and the Prophet said, "Okay, this is a good thing. This is Sunnat al-Hasana. So why we don't fast if this is the events?" Uh, and but then it says ultimately Prophet Muhammad made the fasting of Yom Ashura optional, but then added 1 month long fasting of Ramadan. All these stories are problematic. We are not sure fasting of Ramadan is not before Islam, before Hijrah. The other thing is that there are some narrations says the Prophet Muhammad and even Qurayshis maybe do that fasting of Ashura before even coming to Medina and seeing the Jews. And then the whole thing has many, many problems in it. This tent will say the Jews fasting the tent. Uh, they don't fast on the Yom Kippur. They fast. This is a holiday, the 10th of that first month, which is usually they keep it in Nisan, Bahar, spring. They do celebrate it in Yom Kippur, but they don't fast. And fasting is other days. And then you see how these are mixed together, what the Jews do, what Muslims do, and whether the Western scholars, which of these hadiths are correct or not, how it is understood. But one feature which interesting for me, but also I'm selective to, that it seems whatever this Ashura fasting was, which maybe was prescribed before the event of Ashura of 61 of Hijrah, it has a somber tone, a serious tone. And then when Muslim notice during that day, Jews have festive tone, uh, we have Milad or Eid Nowruz, and then festive, and then we have uh, days of martyrdom, Azah. So it says Muslims have the attitude of this fasting of Ashura, a serious one. Then the Jews, you see, maybe it's that coincided with their atonement, have the festive mood, the women dress, they go adorn, they go sing and dance, and they say, "Why do you do that?" It could be maybe this fast was there, and it's supposed to be a serious tone, and then maybe also uh, preceding or anticipation of what happens in the 10th of Muharram of 61st of Hijrah. Uh, but then during Muawiyah period, all these hadiths, they use this and kind of make it celebratory. They call it the victory of Caliph, for example, defeating Imam Hussein or other ones. So I'm saying if the whole thing, we don't have time to go through it. All these you see, you have lots of material. But if you want to blindly just quote them, they're contradictory, some of storied, some of edited, some of layers added to it. And then you can see now why some of the hesitation with some scholars. Because these fasting maybe 2 lectures, because I have to go all the biblical ones. Which month? But you see, the month is wrong. That they don't have any fasting of the 10th of the first month. They understood it wrongly. It is a 10th is a fasting in the 10th month, not even the 10th day. So you see, furthermore, I have it somewhere here. Furthermore, the only biblical requirement for the 10th day of the first month is to keep a lamb for the Passover sacrifice 4 days later. No fast is mentioned, for example. And then all these mistakes which happened, the wording, in addition, the fast of the 10th, which they claim Jews had, and the Prophet Muhammad picked it up, comes from the fact that Tevet is the 10th month according to the Mosaic calendar, and not because it was the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement is. Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the first month, which there is no fasting in the Jewish calendar. They mix it in this hadith mixing, and then and because the wording in Hebrew also was very reduced, so could produce that. I will stop that. The whole thing is this. Yeah, but just read again this one. Interestingly, the reported atmosphere Yom Ashura among the Jews of Khaybar is similar to the atmosphere of Day of Atonement described in the Mishnah. So maybe there was something, because it seems these Ashura, which is claimed the Jews of Khaybar was celebrating, while Muslim one fasting was somber. and that. I will stop here, but just I want to tell you, okay, look, there are lots of material, but then if we go, they become soon bewildered. Even I took away, I mean, just this fasting could get to half a lecture. The other one, origin of the Jews, all different type of stories will came. So that's the reason you see why we somehow limit our terms to inscriptions, to at least we be certain what we say, we sure what we say is certain. Thank you for your attention, and sorry, go over time a little bit. I stop here.